Wrath is not only the most destructive of the 7 capital sins, but it is also the most difficult to pronounce if you come, like me, from a French-speaking background. So forgive me, but I will use instead hatred, which is the modern version of wrath. My name is Maxim. I'm a clinical psychologist, and my specialty is to bridge modern psychology with age-old wisdom. It is generally admitted that among the many murderers of the 20th century, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were supposed to be the worst, not because they have killed the highest amount of humans. Communist leaders should be credited for that. No, it was because in their vision of the society, hatred was at the center, and that very idea that some population should be completely wiped off to kind of clean up the European nation. And obviously it was about Jews and Gypsies, but that very idea of exterminating entire nation has a very deep root into the Judeo-Christian tradition. And if you go through the Old Testament, you will see many instances where God decided to wipe off an entire population. The story of the deluge is one of them, and except from Noah and his family, God decided to wipe off the entire humanity. Then again, in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, God has again decided to wipe off an entire city, two actually. If you follow the story of Moses, he has no issue to use the angel of death to slaughter all the firstborn of the Egyptian household, and he's even asking explicitly to Moses and to Joshua when they conquer again the land of Israel, not only to kill men, but to kill women, children, animals, and even to destroy the building. So, for centuries, the Almighty has the monopoly on hatred. And it is a very disturbing fact if you are a believer. There is not much in modern psychology to explain hatred. Freud explains that we have that death drive, which is a very dark tendency to try to get rid of everything that causes tension, and sometimes that thing is people or even an entire nation. But frankly, hatred is very difficult to explain. We know that sometimes apes like bonobo would decide to perform a genocide in another bonobo tribe and kill all the babies. It is unclear why, but we humans, and some apes apparently, have that tendency sometimes to destroy others completely. And we may call that tendency hatred. But hatred is not only a matter of genocides. We all do hatred from time to time. And actually, whenever we consider that someone has too much power, and whenever we feel like we want to reduce their power or their prestige, we are already into hatred. Because hatred is not only about destroying people, but every tendency we have to undermine their power is also based on hatred. And amongst nations, for instance, a very big part of the activity has to do with reducing the power of others, trying to interfere with the democratic activity, the economic growth, and any sorts of spying allow us to decrease their power, and every action of that such can be considered as based on hatred. So whenever you do something to decrease the power of someone, you are already into hatred. And it's a very painful experience to feel yourself being subject to hatred. But it is what humans do, and you cannot be fully human if you have never encountered hatred into your heart. If we really try to make sense out of hatred, it could be imagined as a mechanism that sets up into ourselves to try to protect our own integrity. To a point, if we interact with others, we are always at risk that the others are taking advantage on us. And hatred is a radical way to counterbalance that, to try to destroy or at least diminish the power of others. And we may say it's a part of the power relationship. It's a natural part of human interaction. Can we say that there is a healthy sense of hatred? Well, that sounds very ugly. But we should recognize that we tend to see others as a threat for good or bad reasons, because there is actually threat, and there is also a tendency of others to try to conspire about our own interest. So we may say that there is a reasonable level of hatred when we keep in mind that not everyone has good intention towards us, and some people are a real threat to our own interest. Hatred is a mindset that turns other into an enemy. And if you want to get rid of that very powerful drive, there is no way you can convince yourself that you should love thy neighbor. This really doesn't work, because in many cases you feel deeply that those people have caused harm to yourself or to your community. So there is actually just one remedy towards hatred, is to develop the sense of forgiveness. Because whenever you feel that people has caused harm to you, if you don't want to be caught and controlled by your feeling of hatred, at one point you should use your will and decide to get your mind out of hatred. And the only way we can do that is through forgiveness. Every culture has its own ritual to forgive. For instance, the Jews have the Great Pardon, which is a yearly festival where you are supposed to forgive to the people who have offended you, to get away from hatred. The Christians have that confession, which is about trying to forgive yourself and trying to ask God to forgive everything you did wrong. So there is that ritual of forgiving in every culture, and that is the only known remedy for hatred. If you have a soul conditioned by the first ray, you are much more than any other people prone to observe the power relationship. And when you observe power, the relationship, it's almost automatic that you are much more likely to fall into hatred. So more than any other people, you need to cultivate pardon, forgiveness. And it is something you should practice probably on a daily basis. Otherwise, you will be plagued by hatred and all the bad consequences of it, because of obviously when you start to yield on hatred, you activate hatred from the other side, and it's an endless cycle of vendetta. So forgiveness is the only way to get out of it. And forgiveness is not about not taking actions. For instance, you may forgive someone and still ensure that that person has been legally prosecuted for its offenses. There is no way you go into a full forgiveness if there is not some sense of justice reestablished. But there are better ways to make justice than revenge. And for instance, using legal trial is one way to reestablish justice. And when justice is reestablished, you can think about forgiving. If you forgive before any sense of justice is reestablished, you are at risk to be the victim of people's hatred. So it's not that easy, as you can imagine.